Okay, this is the day 500 summary up till today, mid-March 2018. Our series started with this True Pundit article, which talked about 500,000 pay-to-play articles, which were classified, somehow ending up on Anthony Weiner's laptop. We identified how BlackBerry syncing worked from Huma's BlackBerry, and really how BlackBerry syncing worked all up and down what we called an information rat line to get information out of the State Department to folks in the investment community, both people who own oil, gas, mineral resources, as well as people who controlled territory and unfortunately took advantage of human resources like child trafficking potentially and also organ recovery. So our series started looking at all the books out there and also military actions: Libya, Syria, Turkey, Yemen, Sudan, Honduras, potentially Venezuela here soon, with the actions of David Petraeus and the different plans he wrote, as well as people like Neil Brown, who are experts in mining and oil and gas, as well as Eric Braverman, who's an expert in uh, World Bank loans to enable those extractive industries. Now, interestingly, our story is turned a little bit with Braverman in that this Blatvanik school that he spoke at and speaks at is one of the Russian oligarchs that's coming into our story. This recent Felix Sater is going to be related to this group of Russians. It looks like more and more that Braverman will be connected through MI6 through a lot of these different Russian oligarchs as they come to play. So we've met a lot of them: Gubarov, Prokhorov, Katsev, etc., Friedman, and you'll start seeing these names more and more as the congressional inquiries start moving as far as the FISAs are concerned with Christopher Steele. The other thing that we learned about people who have been with our series a long time is they're members of the Senior Executive Service. John Podesta, who manages more the people who own or control land, like foreign ministers or different defense ministers in different countries, or Tom Nidas, who does more silent partners in New York and Los Angeles. We now know they're both Senior Executive Service, so that could be a key lead for us, as well as those insiders that were working with Hillary, Shapiro, Reines, and Bash, all turn out to be Senior Executive Service as well as David Petraeus and Leon Panetta. Now, we don't know about Mike Morrell, but it could be that this key company here, which was sort of the internal CIA inside the Clinton Foundation, could be that they're all Senior Executive Service, which gives us a good lead on everyone else involved for maybe we want to ask them 10 new questions, Devin Nunes, or 30 questions if you're Chuck Grassley, as the investigations roll forward. Again, we might want to ask General Grange here and different people like Sidney Blumenthal. These names, right from the beginning of our series, have turned out to pay off, and it looks like they'll continue to pay off. That we focused on that, as well as the Shelf of Africa and all the different takeovers and the transactions going to HSBC. We'll have sources of information with Soros, and then all the FBI amigos with McCabe, Rosenstein, Mueller, and Comey. So our series took us into Haiti, and so we looked at how USAID was used, not necessarily putting the USAID where the damage and deaths were, but more investing it and laundering it through these hotels, prisons, cruise lines, etc., through different World Bank investments. And we also identified a couple of new people like Rajiv Shah, who's now over at the Rockefeller Foundation. That's usually a great funnel to launder cash. And then we also Timothy Geithner involved with Peter Thiel and some of his investments with CrowdStrike. So interesting connections, how all these names kind of keep coming back. Here's Bill Swing, also a member of the Senior Executive Service, doing testing for weapons and vaccines. So that bioweapons type testing. And here's Fred Eshelman. Don't know if he's Senior Executive Service or not, but the pattern is being established here with Tim Alefantis, for instance, being in bioweapons, that this group of insiders, this SES of 8,000 that got named, could very well be a good source of information and a good cross reference for the 1,100 Juicer partners, as well as the 10 different ambassadors that die, the Russian ambassadors that die, could be key people in objecting to these types of activities, especially in the old Eastern Europe, For instance, Churkin here had objected to Kosovo organ harvesting, and he ended up dying an untimely death. Maybe we'll be able to make those connections with the other 8. We have Kagame here on the world stage as this is kind of the lowest point as far as in the Bouges that the sort of DynCorp dark pay to play goes, as far as not only organ harvesting, but just enslaving populations to get uranium. And then we have other folks who are more at the top end of the analysis of resources, like Valerie Plame and Joe Wilson. But again, those folks are going to have emails as well, and are going to be interesting people to talk to. So that was the first 150 days, basically kind of getting a grounding in subject matter of pay to play. And then it went on the road, of course. We were able to discover the tools, the picks and shovels are basically the laptops and Blackberries. Okay, and we know that we have lots of those flying around. We have 150 iPhones, for instance, from the February 2016 of Imran Awan. So when this story broke, immediately we were connecting this to pay to play, that these devices were the key contacts to pay to play. And if you don't remember, John Kerry was one of the key carriers of this. And so the BlackBerry almost becomes a hook to pull all the fish on the rat line, if you will. And that the Pakistan floods were also negotiated on all these devices. So all the key things that happened in foreign relations and world affairs over the last 9-10 years are going to be pulled together by these rat lines. And of course, it's going to be the Awans in the middle of it. And we know about this illegal server. We know about the 7,000 illegal logins. We know about the terabytes to Pakistan. We know about the hundreds of suspicious money transfers. Could be thousands of suspicious money transfers. We still don't know. Right from the very start, we thought with the CIA car dealership, with the Hezbollah connections, that there was obvious terrorist ties here as well. And of course, we're going to know different people in Congress on the different committees, on the different 3 committees that are going to be important. Remember, we have congressional committees going. We have, in the House and Senate, we have several civil lawsuits, we have several criminal lawsuits, as well as several executive branch investigations going all at once. I can detail those later. It's no wonder that they would try to do rearguard actions after 15 years of having aspiring in Congress, like Jackie Spear here asking for the Awans to get top secret clearance after the fact, along with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Certainly, they had top secret clearance far before this, and we have different people that worked in the chief administrator's office that can vouch for that. Trish Negron here we used to work with, and she was very great about bringing forward the stuff I was doing, writing about it, pushing it out on Twitter. I would encourage everyone to follow her as we go into this trial phase. She was good about bringing out a lot of information about Andy McCabe, who we identified since day one as kind of having this group of dukes, the kind of aspirings all over the world, the coziest ones being in Washington, D.C., which I still say are going to be the Awans. So right from the beginning, when we found out about the Awans, we said, hey, Amjad Awan 25 years ago is exactly the same thing. Opium from Pakistan, have the people transport it from Colombia, launder it through different governments in Central America, launder it, rinse it again through different southern states, banks, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. It's the same old thing all over again, leading us to the moniker Awan Contra. We gave it the new name Awan Contra. Fortunately, we had not only open source research, but we also had some people who had some tradecraft experience, like this Deep Uranium. And he basically married all the rat lines together and said, it's the uranium rat line starting here at Astana, goes along with the space information rat line, because this is the capital of the Russian oligarch space efforts here, as well as the the opium rat lines, as well as the weapons rat lines. So all of it tracing through here. And then along the way, we've met people like Craig Murray, who've got a lot of experience here on the border, Tashkent. And he mentioned that there was satellite technology to manage it all. We didn't know it was Nadra then, but we did a few months later. So that led our open source researchers to identify different areas that Imran Awan's father had interests in, which turned out to be had financial interests with Rahm Emanuel and the drug traffic into Chicago, as well as all major cities like Washington, D.C. here. That led to how the actual opiates were being retailed. We went to pain clinics in Michigan and pain clinics all over Canada. And I was with a filmmaker in Canada, and she actually had a very close relationship with somebody who ended up being on the international watch list and ended up being most probably Pakistani ISI, and then was able to get into the United States through a film scholarship passport. This was what led to I was convinced that the Awans were part of this infiltration in the United States. I talked to Jason Goodwin. We met then. We talked about the Hills and the Bills, separation at the Clinton Foundation. I talked about the Bills and Teneo and Doug Band being more focused on extractive resources and extractive industries, oil, gas, minerals, etc. While the Hills had this nasty tendency to move toward these human resources, more the younger girls and the organ recovery and some of this more unsavory type of DynCorp habits. I went and visited with folks in Minnesota, went and actually met with some terrorist groups or supposedly terrorist groups, and found really this was most likely a construction of the FBI counterterrorism group for funding, bottom line. We went to Ames, Iowa, looked at the places where halal meat was inspected, as well as mangoes from Pakistan, and said this would be the perfect area given the high level of security here by the DHS. The DHS was corrupted inside of the food inspection area. This would be the place where a rat line would be. So that led me to looking at all the rat lines and ending up outside this town called Piketown, Ohio, where there was several murders that had been involved in a potential drug operations, as well as a place where uranium operations had been shut down, which led to the new director of the FBI, had been named a month earlier, Andrew McCabe, creating parallel construction for me and putting me out of commission for 2 days in order to stop me and label me and smear me in the New York Times and CNN, but it did not work. The broadcast was called Clear and Present Danger, and we did identify a clear and present danger, which was we have no uranium testing in any of our major ports. It's done through a television screen wired into the port of Qasim. 4 diplomatic containers were identified as having a high read or no denial of a high read. They were then moved to a different port. This, if nothing else, showed a huge gap in the security of the United States. Now, it's interesting that Teneo, the Bills side of the Clinton Foundation, also sell these very high-resolution scanners for this. Was an incident about ready to happen, and that would have caused the impetus for buying all the high-res scanners sort of in the same way as the airport scanners that we have now? We don't really know the answer to that. We had some good intelligence at the time. Again, I was fully cooperative, and I never called the Coast Guard. But anyway, we did, I believe, a huge service to the country in that we identified that other ports are completely wide open. And we tied that to a Gulf Tainer deal that Jack Lew had done with the top Iraqi nuclear scientists, which was the same deal for the port of Canaveral, which just so happened to be also the key base for our Trident nuclear submarines. So by tying this incident in South Carolina together with the port of Canaveral, we were able to show a glaring weakness or a glaring security hole in the United States defense. So if nothing else, those 2 days were worth showing that. I was close to talking to a second informant, which we didn't get a chance to talk to, but it did lead to an unfolding of potentially the fact that we're shipping out of South Carolina uranium that was mined in the western part of the United States through Uranium One, not just to Canada through a company called Urenco, but also through Urenco into these Middle Eastern states, which had not been known at that time. Again, Julian Assange tweets out of the blue about Nadra, and then we were able to marry up Nadra with this satellite technology that we've been following, potentially through Natalia Sova, but we still don't know the answer to that. But we knew that there was drug lines coming out of Pakistan, the old Golden Route, the North Route here through Uzbekistan, the old route to the west. Okay, so we were just basically working off of modus operandi that had been well established before, only adding satellite tracking to it. One of the key efforts during the summer was to have more folks come out and be whistleblowers. This was Michael McMahon at the Office of OPM. We tied the Awans potentially to the hacks of OPM, the hacks of DHS. Here, I lost my cool at one point in August saying we need to tell the whole story, which is the are these different police reports really phony? Is this really protecting a weapons for drugs game through the cover of color of law opium trade? We still don't know that. We identified other folks as far as representatives, and we've just kept drilling down, basically identifying what we call the BlackBerry 20 that are involved in this. Now, were these different news reports really contrived? The 20 burglaries, were they really a way of confiscating a whole bunch of Blackberries that were involved in illegal weapons for drugs trade? I believe they were, as well as this confiscation. I believe this was just a construction for me to discover when in actual fact the real Blackberries and the real laptops went to Pakistan with all the pay-to-play information the month before. So where are we today? Well, Mueller's investigation ramped greatly up, thinking a good offense replaces a good defense, and basically all the conspirators involved in the pay-to-play that we just talked about just basically projected onto Trump. But the key problem is that they stepped over many legal bounds when they did so, especially during the FISA process. I think you're going to find that the constructions that are currently coming out, remember we have all three different branches now focusing on Christopher Steele and in this FISA court process. We've got the 10 questions from Devin Nunes, the 30 questions from Grassley and Graham, but we've also got three civil lawsuits. We have my three civil lawsuits, as well as Larry Klayman coming at it from the NGA point of view, as well as Judicial Watch trying to get text messages from Andrew McCabe. So there's several actions there, as well as the drug ring that ended up coming out of all this and proving, kind of putting all these pieces together. There is a Department of Justice inquiry into that, as well as the Department of Justice inquiry into this FISA process. All of this stuff basically comes together with the drugs, the information logistics network with the Blackberries and so forth, and the containers all comes together in a project called Project Cassandra. We still don't have all the details about Project Cassandra, but in Virginia alone, it was a $200 million a month drug operation. How many other operations were there? I say there was 20 because there's 20 Blackberries. I can name the cities, pretty much name the reps in each city. That'll be for another time, but that gets you up to date March 18th, 2000.